going to be watching this today. Nuclear bomb.
The power of an atomic bomb is something that's almost difficult to even comprehend. An explosion that can destroy an entire city? What? Absolutely terrifying. And when the very first atomic bomb detonated over New Mexico during the Trinity test in 1945, the world was forever changed. The modern era had begun. But even the Trinity test, which was insane in itself, even that test was small compared to what future atomic explosions would be. By the 60s, we had bombs that were 1,000 times larger. I mean, it's truly insane, and that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the evolution and timeline of atomic weapons. What was the first underwater test? The first underground test? What about the first test in space? We also have a record-holding blast yield chart. We're going to cover all the milestones, talk about all the big events in today's video on the evolution and history of the atomic bomb.
I'm recording this on a phone to TV, and this is it.
Twinings, drinking life.
Shut up, woman.
We are starting our
British.
timeline back in 1945 with the first atomic test, the Trinity test. This test occurred on July 16, 1945 at 5:29 a.m. local time at what was then the White Sands Proving Ground, just 40 miles southeast of Socorro, New Mexico. This was an atmospheric test with a blast yield of about 25 kilotons of TNT. The height of the mushroom cloud reached over 38,000 feet. The Trinity test was a culmination of the top-secret Manhattan Project. The device itself was like a metal sphere with wires attached to it, and it was referred to as the Gadget. This was also the first bomb to utilize the implosion plutonium design. Now, obviously, the Trinity test was the largest atomic bomb ever detonated, so it is indeed our first record holder. Less than a month later, on August 6th, the first use of an atomic bomb during wartime occurred over Hiroshima, Japan. The atomic bomb named Little Boy exploded with a yield of about 16 kilotons, all in all taking the lives of somewhere between 80 and 140,000 individuals. The Little Boy atomic bomb design was the first gun-type fission weapon, and the first atomic bomb to only utilize uranium-235. Only a few days later, on August 9th, the city of Nagasaki would also be struck with an atomic bomb, taking the lives of 40 to 80,000 people. It is the last
Need to adjust it a little bit. Since I'm recording on a phone, make sure it doesn't.
atomic bomb to ever be used during wartime. The bomb used over Nagasaki utilized the Mark III or Fat Man design, which was an implosion plutonium device based off of the first atomic bomb during the Trinity test. The Mark III Fat Man design was the first bulk-produced atomic bomb, with 120 built. On September 2nd, 1945, World War II would come to an end, and surprisingly, the next nuclear bomb test wouldn't occur until almost a year later in the summer of 1946 with Operation Crossroads. The actual first post-war atomic bomb detonation was Crossroads Able, which was also nicknamed Gilda. This occurred on June 30th, 1946, and utilized the Fat Man Mark III atomic weapon design. The blast field was about 23 kilotons, and it was detonated about 600 feet above the water, 3.5 miles away from Bikini Atoll. Bikini Atoll is part of the Pacific Proving Grounds, one of several test sites that we will be discussing today. The second test of the Crossroads series was Baker, also about 23 kilotons. The Baker test was the first underwater atomic bomb, and the footage of the blast has become absolutely iconic. Many famous atomic bomb photos are of the Baker test. The The bomb itself was about 90 feet underwater, attached to the USS LSM-60. The USS LSM-60 is this boat right here. No piece from the LSM-60 was ever recovered. Since this test was done underwater, the blinding light that you usually see from an atomic weapon cannot be seen. After Operation Crossroads came Operation Sandstone in 1948. This test was the first to occur at Eniwetok Atoll and also featured a new high-yield record with Sandstone Yoke, which produced a yield of 49 kilotons on April 30th, 1946. So we have a new bomb to put on the list. Operation Sandstone was the first to be carried out by the Atomic Energy Commission, and their purpose was to test out a new bomb design. This would all lead to the development of the Mark IV nuclear bomb, the first mass-produced bomb with 550 made. 1945 to 1948 was kind of the golden age for the United States and their atomic testing. No other country had atomic bombs. They really had nothing to worry about. They were just trying different things, blowing up ships because they were the sole nuclear power. But all of that would change in 1949. In 1949, the Soviet Union became the second country to successfully create an atomic explosion, and they would do so with RDS-1. RDS-1, aka First Lightning, or as the Americans refer to it, Joe 1, exploded on August 29, 1949 with a yield of 21 kilotons. This test was conducted at a remote test site in Kazakh SSR. The bomb design was very similar, one might say identical, to the Fat Man design, thanks to some Soviet espionage. The event would mark the beginning of the Cold War, a war that would last all the way up into the 90s. Many families in both the Soviet Union and the United States during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s thought that maybe, tomorrow won't come and they'll just be obliterated in the middle of the night. It's pretty scary. 1950, though, was a nice, relaxing year, as there were no atomic tests in 1950. However, 1951 would...
Tomorrow won't come is, while everybody's asleep, the bombs go off. And they get vaporized.
Marked the first atomic test to occur over the continual United States since Trinity. Operation Ranger was a series of 5 bombs, and they were the first to be tested at the Nevada test site, specifically Area 5. The smallest test was able with only a 1 kiloton yield. The largest was 22 kilotons. Going back out to Eniwetok Atoll, at the Pacific Proving Grounds, we have another new major atomic milestone. The first atomic bomb with a yield of over 100 kilotons. In fact, make that over 200 kilotons. The test series greenhouse had a specific test known as George that had an estimated yield of 225 kilotons. That's already way larger than the Trinity test, and we're not even close to how big it gets. This test was conducted on May 8th, 1951, and was meant to test out a theoretical thermonuclear design, something we'll get to soon. Definitely a new record holder. So obviously we have 2 different test sites. We have the Nevada test site, NTS, and we have the Pacific Proving Grounds, which is part of the Marshall Islands. And you'll notice that the large, huge atomic bombs were all tested out at the Pacific Proving Grounds, and all the smaller 20 kiloton tests occurred at the Nevada test site. One would assume that would be for safety reasons. They didn't want massive 220 kiloton explosions over the continual United States in case there's some drift of whatever. So yeah, why not the middle of the Pacific? Towards the end of 1951, a new test series at the Nevada test site known as Operation Buster Jangle would be the first to feature armed soldiers. Perhaps you have seen the iconic footage of soldiers in trenches jumping out and walking towards a mushroom cloud. Definitely creepy vibes from this clip. Also during Operation Buster Jangle, the test Uncle was the first that was partially underground. So we had the USSR and the USA as the sole nuclear powers all the way through 1951. However, we had a new country entering the Atomic Superpowers Club in 1952 with the United Kingdom and Operation Hurricane. Operation Hurricane was conducted at Montebello Islands in Western Australia on October 2nd and had a yield of 25 kilotons. There were now 3 nuclear powers, but only a month later, the US would be entering the second generation, a new tier of nuclear weapons, the first thermonuclear device. So what the heck is that? Well, a thermonuclear bomb, also referred to as a...
What I think is what the United States should have done was they should have used it. They should have used it and hid it in bunkers. So then nobody can find it, or even if that doesn't work, they should have used, like, before they used it, they should have thought, what if, once we use this, the Soviet Union or someone else, like Japan or something, could get the nuke, or somebody who doesn't like us could get a nuke and they would end us. Sorry if you can't see some of the stuff. It's a little small.
Hydrogen bomb, or H-bomb, utilizes the power of fusion rather than fission. Just know that, like, this is a whole new level of bomb. We don't talk about kilotons when we talk about thermonuclear bombs. We talk about megatons. 1 megaton is 1,000 kilotons. The first...
It's not citrus. It's one of my favorite fruits.
Sorry.
The first successful
no
thermonuclear
way to
test
get rid
came
of
on
that
November
besides-
1st, 1952 with Operation
Yeah.
Ivy Test Mike. Ivy Mike was detonated over Enowetok Atoll and had an estimated blast yield of 10 megatons. 10 megatons. 10,000 times larger than that 1 kiloton explosion we talked about earlier. Yeah, definitely our new record holder. But pure fission bombs weren't done yet. In fact, the largest U.S. fission bomb ever detonated occurred a couple weeks later on November 16th with Ivy King. This Gen 1 pure fission bomb had a yield of 500 kilotons. The Soviets were quick to join the second generation.
Just gonna pop you down there. I'm gonna move a little farther up because I was right in front of the heater, which is here very, very hot. No, don't hit that.
Of thermonuclear weapons, as less than a year later, on August 12, 1953, they conducted RDS-6, also known as Joe 4 here in the U.S. However, the blast yield wasn't very impressive for a second-generation atomic bomb, as it only had a blast yield of 400 kilotons, still easily enough to destroy a city. Going back out to the Nevada test site, we have the first tactical nuclear warhead shot from a cannon, aka our first atomic artillery device. This was a 280mm artillery-fired atomic projectile. This was part of Operation Upshot Knot Hole, and the shot itself was Grapple, which occurred on May 25th, 1953. Similar to Operation Buster Jangle, Upshot Knot Hole involved over 21,000 soldiers. This test again came with some pretty iconic footage. Textbook mushroom cloud right here. A year later, on March 1st, 1954, we have a new high-yield blast record with Operation Castle Test Bravo. Castle Bravo had an estimated blast yield of 15 megatons. Absolutely insane. And it was actually quite surprising to have such a high blast yield because they only expected somewhere between 7 and 8 megatons. Unfortunately, due to this high blast yield and an unpredictable weather pattern, the fallout from Castle Bravo actually spread over the Marshall Islands and caused over 90 injuries, and unfortunately would take the life of a radio man on a Japanese ship known as 5th Lucky Dragon. The controversies behind this test, as well as other tests over the Pacific Proving Grounds, was actually the inspiration behind Godzilla. Speaking of Godzilla and pop culture, perhaps you are familiar with the Call of Duty map Nuketown. Well, that's...
Wait, I like Godzilla 54. Or not 54. I haven't seen most of the other ones. I love Godzilla 2014. King of the Monsters is to an eh. Like the start of it is good, and the end of it's terrible. Sorry if you can't really hear me. I'm kind of far away. But like Godzilla versus Kong. I like when Mechagodzilla comes out, but that's it. Then like XCOM is stupid. Like yeah, I don't like it. Honestly, I don't like that. What's his name? I don't like Shimu. I don't like the Scar King or whatever. Because Scar King reminds me of the Lion King. Scar King, take away King, it's Scar. That's why I don't like that movie. It's a really good movie. I don't remember anything though. Sorry.
Inspired by the next operation on our timeline, Operation Teapot. Operation Teapot had a shot named Apple II that occurred on May 5th, 1955. Apple II was intended to test various building construction types in an atomic blast. All the tests from Apple II were actually made into a documentary made by the Federal Civil Defense Administration called Operation Q, and it was released.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah. Sound is vibration. You know? So, all shockwaves, including the ones from nukes, since those are basically a ton of vibrations, isn't a shockwave a vibration or a sound?
To the public, to give them an idea of what it would be like. Definitely an iconic test. The next test actually occurred 500 miles off the coast of San Diego, California with Operation Wigwam. This was the first deep water test, and it was meant to research how vulnerable submarines are to underwater nuclear blasts. The blast itself was about 30 kilotons at a depth of 2,000 feet. So we talked about the first Soviet thermonuclear bomb, RDS-6, earlier. Well, now we come to the first true Soviet thermonuclear bomb, the Soviets' first bomb in the megatons. RDS-37 had 1.6 megatons and was tested on November 22nd, 1955. It was highly inspired by the US's Castle Bravo test. Unfortunately, 2 people were killed in this atomic test. A soldier in a trench below, and a little girl who was in a building over 40 miles away. Check out this footage from a town 45 miles away. This is one of my favorite pieces of atomic footage because it kind of gives you like a real world example of what it would be like to be in a situation like this.
Stick figures. Actual living people.
It just looks so eerie off in the distance. And then several minutes later, the blast wave finally catches up to you. We are now moving forward to 1957, back in the United States with the controversial Operation Plumb Bob. Can't quite say that. Operation Plumb PB is notable for having the largest nuclear weapon ever tested over the continual U.S. with the shot Hood. This was at 74 kilotons and occurred on is notable for having the largest nuclear weapon. Plumb Bob. Can't quite say that. Operation Plumb PB is notable for having the.
Look at him. Look at all the people. Look at that guy on the right next to the sign. Ground zero, probably. That's why I don't stare directly at it.
Largest nuclear weapon ever tested over the continual U.S. with the shot Hood. This was at 74 kilotons and occurred on July 5th, 1957. Also with Operation PB, we have the first fully underground test with the shot Rainier, which was on September 19th. The bomb was only 1.7 kilotons, but it was still enough to be detected by seismologists all around the world. We have a third country joining the Thermonuclear Club with the United Kingdom on November 8th.
Every time I talk, either I'm not talking at all when I'm watching it, when I'm making a video. Like, I only talk like once or twice. One word, and then one word, or I'm a Yakatron.
1957. The test Grapple X was conducted over Christmas Island. The blast yield was 1.8 megatons, which I guess is spelled differently in UK English. However, their largest yield ever was from Grapple Y, which occurred on April 28, 1958, and had an estimated yield of 3 megatons. After this test, the Brits and the Americans actually joined forces with the 1958 US-UK Mutual Defense Agreement. This allowed the British to test their atomic weapons at the Nevada test site, which they did 24 times. It's time to go up to the very first high atmospheric test, which came with Operation Hardtack 1 Shot Teak at 76.8 kilometers above the Earth's surface. And this was with a massive 3.8 megaton atomic bomb. Technically, this is upper atmosphere. It's not a true space atomic test, but that would come with Operation Argus and Argus 1, conducted at 200 kilometers above the Earth's surface. But this only had a yield of 1.7 kilotons. Towards the end of 1958, we entered a Argus and Argus 1, conducted at 200 kilometers above the Earth's surface, but this only had a yield of 1.7 kilotons. Towards the end of 1958, we entered a limited test ban treaty between the USSR and the USA. This occurred between 1958 and 1961. Do you know who didn't participate in the limited test ban treaty? Well, that would be France, who tested their first atomic bomb on February 13th. 1960 with Operation Gerboy Bleu. This was done over in French Algeria.
No farming home. Sorry, I just wanted to say that. No hope.
And had a yield of 70 kilotons. So of course we did have that limited test ban treaty that we were talking about earlier. That was about to end, and the Soviet Union really wanted to flex on just the world, and they would do so on October 30th, 1961, with the massive Tsar bomb, which had an estimated magnitude of 52 to 60.
If you were under the age of 5 and watching this, it says.
So of course we did have that limited test ban treaty that we were talking about earlier. That was about to end, and the Soviet Union really wanted to flex on just the world, and they would do so on October 30th.
Tsar bomb. It's TSAR. If you don't know anything about letters, we could probably do it for 5 or maybe 30 watching this, but SAR. This is SAR without the T, or it has the T silent. Learn your numbers. Never mind.
1961 with the massive Tsar bomba, which had an estimated magnitude of 52 to 60 megatons. Truly insane. In fact, the bomb itself was rated for 100 megatons. This is the largest atomic bomb ever detonated, so it is the final member on our list. Here's what it looks like compared to the Trinity test. I mean, absolutely mind-boggling. This was done way up here on this long island above the Soviet Union. Following the massive Tsar Bomba, the US conducted the very first all-underground test with Operation Nougat, which occurred between 1961 and 1962. This test would be a precursor to what would become the norm in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The first atomic handheld rocket launcher would also come in 1962. This little handheld rocket launcher was called the Davy Crockett. The first atomic handheld rocket launcher would also come in 1962. This little handheld rocket launcher was called the Davy Crockett. Also with Operation Sunbeam came the smallest nuclear bomb ever with Little Feller 1, which occurred on July 17th, 1962. This was also the last atomic bomb atmospheric test over the continual U.S. Back out in the ocean, we go to the first ICBM test, and that was Frigate Bird of Operation Dominic on May 6, 1962. This was the first and only ICBM test with an active warhead. A pretty massive warhead too, as it had a yield of 700 kilotons. Finally, we come to Operation Fishbowl, which had the largest atomic bomb ever detonated in outer space. The test, Starship Prime, had 1.4 megatons, and it exploded over 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Also with Operation Fishbowl came the final U.S. atmospheric atomic test. This This was a test tightrope, and it was conducted on November 4th, 1962. In 1963, everything with atomic testing would change with the Partial Test Ban Treaty. This prohibited any signing nation from testing atomic bombs except for those conducted underground. There was one notable nation that did not sign this treaty, and that is, of course, China, who conducted their first test on October 16th, 1964. Their first test was titled 596. And 3 years later, they would conduct their first thermonuclear test, with test number 6 that occurred on June 17th, 1967. Following the Limited Test Ban Treaty, the U.S. conducted Operation Storax, which actually looked into finding non-war uses for atomic bombs. So perhaps, could you use an atomic bomb for mining or for creating a large hole in the ground, which is exactly what they did with the test Sedan. Sedan is by far the largest crater at the Nevada test site. The Russians did something very similar and created a large crater themselves. However, theirs actually filled up with water and turned into a lake known as Lake Changan. So the 60s and 70s and 80s were kind of a lot of nothing, just a lot of underground tests. There were a few notable tests that we should discuss though. On November 6, 1971, Operation Grommet Test Kanakin was the largest underground nuclear explosion ever at 5 megatons. Another event worth mentioning was the very last atmospheric test ever, at least to this day in 2023, and that was from China on October 16th, 1980. Another notable operation was the first joint Soviet-US test with Operation Touchstone in 1988. And finally, the last US test was the shock divider of Operation Julin on September 23rd, 1992. After this test, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty would go in effect, and this would ban all atomic tests from all the signing nations. Here's a list of every nation who has tested an atomic weapon, including both a fission bomb, a fusion bomb, and the last time they tested one. It's possible that China may have conducted an atomic test in 2020, although it has not been confirmed, and that's a little sketch. So yeah, atomic bombs, they're scary. Thanks for watching, we'll see you in the next video.
Don't use my legal name again. Project Sundial. Code Girl. Can't say. Yes.
In the 1950s, the US began the top-secret project Sundial. Most of it is still classified. The goal, a single nuclear bomb so powerful it would destroy all of human civilization. Conceived in cold logic from the mind of a genius scientist. Sundial had the energy equivalent of 10 billion tons of TNT, a pyramid of explosives 13 times taller than the actual Great.
Sorry, I don't know if you can all, if people who are watching can see the entire screen. Because from my point of view, I can't see the full screen, but I can't see the full screen on my phone. Because part of it's covered by a blanket, which I'm holding there, so I can actually record it. And without having to hold it. Great King Gun.
Pyramid. 3,000 more than all the bombs dropped during World War II. If you dropped the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima every minute, it would take you over 15 months to match Sundial. How was it even possible for us to achieve this insane level of madness? Everything is different forever. Let's set the stage. If you were 40 in 1945, that means you were born in 1905.
Nuclear black hole. Nuking a black hole is a good idea. If you think nuking a black hole is a good idea, you are a stupid person.
Playing around with nuclear weapons in videos is fun. There's a visceral joy in blowing things up and a horrifying fascination with things like fire.
If you, oh wait, I didn't turn on captions. sorry if you're deaf, and you watched this video and you didn't know what the last person was saying.
Balls, shockwaves, and radiation. And while it does help put our destructive power in perspective, it's not the best way of understanding the real impact of a nuclear explosion. This isn't about silly stacks of TNT or about how bright an explosion is. Nuclear weapons are about you. So we've partnered with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement to explore what would really happen if a nuclear weapon were detonated in a major city today. Not nuclear war, just one explosion.
Oh yeah, also, this video is about what would happen with a nuclear bomb in a city. So you should pay attention, because if this actually happens, you need to know what this is. What happens in this,
We begin our story in the middle of downtown in a major city. People are going to work, studying for exams, are lost in their thoughts and daily lives. Right here, a nuclear weapon is detonated and time freezes. The first phase of the explosion happens within less than a second. In a millisecond, a ball of plasma hotter than the sun appears and grows in a fireball to more than 2 kilometers across. Within this ball, everyone is just gone.
And you're younger than 5 kilometers are more than a mile. I think a kilometer is like 2,000 miles. It's like 200 miles. It's like 63 miles, right? I don't know.
Think of water dripped onto a very hot pan, a sizzle, and then there's nothing. Most buildings, cars, trees, tacky sculptures, and people, all evaporated.
Everything gone.
First, the flash, an intense tsunami of light, washes over the city in an instant.
All those people in the metro tunnel, all those birds, all the buildings, people in train, or people in the building, or whatever, gone in an instant. Ended.
If you happen to have your head pointed in the direction of the explosion, it renders you blind for a few hours. The heat of this light produces a thermal pulse, so energetic and hot that it...
And nobody even knows this happened to them because people who are inside the blast wave are just gone. No more, nothing. Dust.
just burns everything as far as 13 kilometers from the detonation site. What this means is that everything in an area of 500 square kilometers that is able to burn starts burning. Plastic, wood, fabric, hair, and skin.
Your skin will melt. If you're in the area of where it's gonna get burned, even if you're not even close to it, you're still gonna die because your skin will literally melt. Everything. Say you're wearing a shirt, pants. It's gone. Yeah, everything is gone. It's actually quite sad. So you're sitting on a bench. Somehow, if you were invincible, like nothing happened to you, like you didn't get hurt, like you didn't feel pain, you didn't get hurt, even if you're getting burned. You're sitting on a bench. The next second, it's on fire and you're on the ground.
If you happen to be in reach of the thermal pulse, one moment you're on your way to work, the next moment you're on fire. Now the second phase begins. It happens in a few seconds. Most people will now first notice that something is wrong, but it's already too late for hundreds of thousands. The flash is followed by the shockwave. The heat and radiation of the fireball create a bubble of superheated and supercompressed air around it that's now expanding explosively, faster than the speed of sound, creating winds stronger than hurricanes and tornadoes. Human infrastructure is no match for its power. Most major buildings within a kilometer of the fireball are just ground up down to their base. Only steel-reinforced concrete is able to partially resist the pressure. In the surround...
It's like, bro, most of our infrastructure can't survive that.
In parks where retirees feed the ducks, trees blackened and smouldering from the heat a second before snap like toothpicks. If you're outside, you get tossed away like a grain of dust in a tornado. The shock wave weakens as it travels outwards, but still, about 175 square kilometers of houses collapse like they're made of cards, trapping tens of thousands of people who didn't have any time to react. Gas stations explode and fires spread throughout the rubble. A mushroom cloud made from the remains of the fireball, dust and ash rises kilometers into the sky in the next few minutes and casts a dark shadow over the ruined city. This violently pulls in fresh air surrounding the city, destroying more buildings and providing an abundance of oxygen. It depends on the city what happens next. If there's enough fuel, fires may turn into a firestorm that burns the rubble, everybody trapped in it, and people trying to flee the devastation. Up to 21 kilometers from the explosion, people just like you rush to their windows to take pictures of the mushroom cloud, unaware that the shockwave is still coming at them, about to shatter their windows and create a blizzard of sharp glass. The third phase begins in the coming hours and days. We're used to the idea that help will come, no matter the disaster. This time is different. A nuclear explosion is like every natural disaster at once. There are hundreds of thousands or millions of people with serious injuries, lacerations, broken bones, serious burns. In the next few minutes and hours, thousands more will die because of these injuries. Countless people are trapped in collapsed buildings like in earthquakes, or blinded by the flash, deaf from the blast wave, and unable to flee through streets impassable with rubble and debris. They're terrified, confused, and don't know what's happened to them or why. Most likely, many hospitals have been leveled along with all the other buildings, and most medical professionals are either dead or injured along with everyone else. The survivors lucky enough to have been in metro tunnels or standing in the right place to be unburned and unhurt won't have truly escaped harm yet. Depending on the type of weapon, where it explodes, and even the weather, an awful black rain can begin, with radioactive ash and dust descending on the city, covering everything and everyone. The invisible, malicious...
If I just pushed my arms back and some of my muscle and skin went and compressed itself, like where my spine is.
Just silent horror of radiation takes its turn. Every breath carries poison to the lungs of the survivors. Over the coming days, the people who receive the highest doses of radiation exposure will die. There will be no help, not for hours or maybe even days. Civilization doesn't operate when there is a total breakdown of infrastructure.
What was that?
Roads are blocked, train tracks warped, runways cluttered with rubble. No water, no electricity, no communication, no stores to replenish supplies from. Help from surrounding cities will have a hard time entering the disaster zone, and even if they can, the radioactive contamination will make it risky to get too close. After a nuclear attack, you're on your own. So, bit by bit, people emerge from the rubble, on foot, contaminated with radioactive fallout, carrying what little they may have left. They are slow, in pain, traumatized, and they all need food, water, and medical treatment fast. And the damage done by a nuclear weapon doesn't end when the fires burn out and the smoke clears. The hospitals in the neighboring cities are under-equipped for a disaster of this scale and overwhelmed with tens or hundreds of thousands of patients with serious injuries. In the weeks, months, and years to come, many of those who survived will succumb to cancers like leukemia. The reason no government wants you to think about all this is because there is no serious humanitarian response possible to a nuclear explosion. There's no way to really help the immediate victims of a nuclear attack. This is not a hurricane, wildfire, or earthquake, or nuclear accident. It is all of these things at once, but worse. No nation on Earth is prepared to deal with it. The world has changed in the past few years, with world leaders again explicitly and publicly.
And that's it. Because I'm not. This has gone for 38 minutes.